Hi, traveler. Welcome to my channel. I know you have worked hard all day and are very tired. Now you can close your eyes, relax, listen to my stories and the sound of the rain, and slowly fall asleep. Cigarettes and paper planes. A nostalgic journey of friendship. ASMR sleep story. I still remember the smell of that place, my friend. It was always the same strange mix of old wood, spilled beer, and cheap cigarettes lingering heavy in the air. The bar was tucked away in a forgotten corner of town, the kind of place you stumbled into by accident and then kept coming back to without really knowing why. Maybe you have a place like that too? Somewhere that feels like a second skin, worn and comfortable. It was on a Thursday night, not busy, not loud. Just a few regulars slumped over their drinks, murmuring about football games and old flames. I was nursing a whiskey, tracing the rim of the glass with my finger, when it happened. A paper plane sailed through the smoky air and landed right in front of me, spinning slightly on impact. At first, I thought it was some drunk joke. I glanced around, confused, until I saw her. She was sitting at the other end of the bar, elbows propped up on the sticky surface, a mischievous smile curling at the corner of her lips. She lifted her glass toward me in a silent toast. Curious, I picked up the paper plane. It was folded neatly from a napkin, delicate but sturdy. In messy, looping handwriting, it said simply, "Hi." I laughed, maybe a little too loud, feeling the way your chest sometimes lightens unexpectedly. You know that feeling, right? When the world tilts just a little, and for once, it's not because of the whiskey. I wrote "hi" back on the same napkin and folded it clumsily into a new plane. It didn't fly as gracefully as hers did, sort of crashed halfway across the bar, but she caught it anyway, laughing so hard she nearly knocked over her drink. That laugh, dear friend, it filled the whole bar, lit up the dark corners like a string of fairy lights. It wasn't polished or careful, it was real. It was the kind of laugh that makes you forget, for just a second, all the reasons you built your walls in the first place. She came over after that, dragging her stool with a squeal across the floor. Her name was Elena. She had a voice like low music, and she smelled like rain and cigarettes. Not the heavy, stale kind of smoke, but something lighter, almost nostalgic, like the first bonfire of autumn. "So," she said, tapping the rim of her glass, "you any good at flying, or was that just beginner's luck?" Her smile was teasing, but her eyes, they were serious. They looked at you like they were trying to memorize you, piece by piece. Ever had someone look at you like that, my friend? It's dangerous, I'll tell you that much. We talked until the bartender kicked us out, switching from whiskey to cheap beers, swapping silly paper planes and sillier secrets. When she laughed, she covered her mouth with her hand, like she was embarrassed by her own joy. And I realized, somewhere between the third beer and the fifth paper plane, that I didn't want the night to end. Before we parted ways, she folded one last plane, a tiny thing, no bigger than my palm. She slipped it into the pocket of my jacket without a word. I didn't even look at it until I got home, until I was lying half drunk on my couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. Unfolding it carefully, I found 4 words written inside. Don't lose this feeling. And dear, even now, all these years later, sometimes when the night is quiet and the air smells a little like rain, I wonder if I ever really could. The next morning, my head was pounding, my mouth dry like sandpaper. You know that kind of hangover, right? The kind where the world feels 2 shades too bright, and your body moves like it's underwater. But even through the haze, I remembered Elena. I found myself reaching into the pocket of my jacket, feeling the tiny crumpled paper there. Don't lose this feeling. I smiled, even though it hurt my temples. It was foolish, maybe, but I decided right then, my friend, that I was going to see her again. I didn't even know her last name. Hell, I didn't even know if she really existed or if she was some whiskey-soaked dream. But you and I both know sometimes the good things don't wait for us to figure them out. Sometimes you just have to leap. So I leapt. The bar didn't open until late afternoon. I killed time walking around the city, nursing a bad coffee in a worse mood, counting down the hours like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. Every now and then, I'd catch myself smiling for no reason. Passing strangers must have thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. When I finally pushed through the heavy door, the bar looked exactly the same. Dim lights, cracked leather booths, the jukebox humming something low and slow. The bartender, a grizzled man with a beard like a nest of crows, gave me a once-over. "You're back early," he grunted. I shrugged. Looking for someone. He didn't ask who. Maybe he already knew. Places like that, they see a lot of lost souls, but not many that shine. I settled into a booth near the back, ordered something weak just to have something in my hands. The hours dragged by. Every time the door creaked open, my heart jumped up into my throat. And every time, it wasn't her. I was about ready to give up, call myself a fool, when I heard that laugh. Light, unguarded, filling the bar like sunlight through dirty windows. I turned so fast I nearly knocked over my drink. There she was. Same ripped jeans, same messy hair, same spark in her eyes. And when she saw me, she didn't act surprised. No. She just smiled that slow, knowing smile, and walked right over like she had expected me all along. "You came back," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Her voice was a little hoarse, like she'd been laughing or yelling or maybe just living a little too hard. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was doing somersaults in my chest. Couldn't stay away. She grinned, stealing a sip of my drink without asking. "You're persistent," she said. "Stupid, maybe," I replied, and she laughed again. God, that laugh. I would have chased it across continents. We spent that night talking again. This time, it wasn't silly games or paper planes. It was real things, The kind of things you only tell someone you don't expect to keep. She told me about her dreams of owning a bookstore. I told her about my failed attempts at writing a novel. We talked about places we'd never been, but swore we'd visit someday. Dear friend, have you ever met someone and felt like you were talking to an old memory? Not someone new, but someone you'd somehow always known? That's what it was like with Elena. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. The bar closed again around us. We stood outside in the chilly air, neither of us willing to say goodnight. The street lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. She shivered, and without thinking, I slipped off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at me then, really looked, and for a moment the whole world narrowed down to just the two of us. "Walk me home?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Of course I would. I would have followed her anywhere. As we walked through the sleepy streets, our shoulders brushing occasionally, she started humming, a soft, tuneless thing, like a lullaby half remembered. It drifted up into the night, weaving between the trees and empty storefronts. I didn't know it then, my friend, but that little humid would come to mean more to me than any song ever had. When we reached her building, a crumbling old thing with ivy crawling up the sides, she turned to me. For a second, it looked like she was going to say something important. But instead, she just smiled, kissed my cheek, and disappeared through the heavy wooden door. I stood there for a long time, the cold biting through my shirt, smiling like a fool, and somewhere deep in my chest, I knew I was in trouble. The next few weeks, my friend, were a kind of magic I didn't know could exist outside of movies. Elena and I slipped into each other's lives like it was the most natural thing in the world. You know that feeling, right? When everything just fits. Like maybe the universe had been nudging you toward this person all along. We didn't do anything grand or dramatic. No fancy dates, no over-the-top declarations, just late-night walks, endless conversations over burnt coffee, shared glances that said more than words ever could. It was simple. It was perfect. One night, we ended up at a divey little diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and cracked vinyl booths. The waitress called everyone Han, and the coffee tasted like regret. But we didn't care. We just sat there, elbows touching, laughing about nothing. And then it happened. That moment, the one you don't see coming but changes everything. The old jukebox in the corner started to whir and clank, coughing up a song I hadn't heard in years. Some dusty old tune from the 70s, full of scratchy guitar and aching vocals. And when the first notes floated out into the diner, Elena's face lit up. She grabbed my hand, her eyes wide and shining. "This is it," she said, like I was supposed to understand. "This is our song." I laughed, a little confused. "But we just heard it," I said. She shook her head, that wild hair falling into her eyes. No, it found us." Dear one, have you ever felt that? like something was meant for you, plucked right out of the universe and dropped into your lap. That's what it felt like the universe was tipping its hat, winking, saying, "Here you go, kid, don't mess it up." We didn't dance. Not there, not then. We just sat, listening, fingers intertwined on the greasy table. And somehow, it was more intimate than any slow dance could have been. From then on, that song became ours. It followed us everywhere, played on random radios, drifted out of open windows, even showed up in television commercials. We'd catch each other's eyes and grin like kids sharing a secret. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a thread tying us together, invisible but unbreakable. We started making little traditions around it. If it played while we were walking, we had to stop and dance no matter where we were. Once we slow danced in the middle of a grocery store aisle, right between canned beans and tomato sauce. Another time, on a rainy sidewalk, dripping wet and laughing like fools. People stared, sure, but we didn't care. Because when you find your person, my friend, the rest of the world just fades away. It's like living inside a secret, a beautiful, fragile secret that only the two of you understand. I started writing again. Not novels, not yet. Just little scrap spoons, half-finished songs, scribbled on napkins and receipts. Words poured out of me in a way they hadn't in years. It was like Elena had cracked me open, and all the light I'd been keeping inside finally spilled out. One night, after one too many cheap beers, I confessed to her, told her I wanted to write a book someday, a real one. She didn't laugh, didn't scoff or tell me it was a pipe dream. She just looked at me, serious and soft, and said, "Then do it. The world needs your stories." God, my friend, have you ever had someone believe in you so fiercely that you started to believe it too? It's a rare kind of magic. The kind that doesn't just change your life, it changes your soul. The seasons shifted slowly around us. Summer slipped into a golden, crisp autumn. We spent cool evenings bundled in jackets, our breath making little ghosts in the air. The city felt smaller with her beside me, safer. There were fights, of course. Little ones, silly things about nothing at all. But even the fights felt like part of the song's somehow minor chords in a bigger melody. And always, we found our way back to each other. Because that's what love is, isn't it? Not the absence of conflict, but the stubborn, tender choosing of each other anyway. One chilly night, we found ourselves sitting on the fire escape outside her apartment, sharing a bottle of terrible red wine straight from the bottle. The city sprawled out below us, twinkling and buzzing. Elena rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence. After a while, she said, almost too quietly to hear, "Promise me something?" "Anything," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "Promise me," she whispered. "No matter what happens, that song stays ours." I turned my head to look at her, at the worry creasing her brow, the way her eyes seemed to see things far beyond the rooftop and stars. "I promise," I said, "and I meant that too." If only promises were enough. Looking back now, my friend, I wonder when the cracks first started to form. Was it a Tuesday morning when she didn't answer my call? Was it a Thursday night when I found myself waiting alone outside her work? Or maybe it was even earlier, hidden in the spaces between our laughter, tucked away in the things we didn't say. You know, sometimes love doesn't break with a bang. It unravels slowly, quietly, like a song fading out long before you realize it's over. Have you ever felt that? That slow, sinking feeling, like standing in the ocean and not noticing the tide pulling you out until it's too late? At first, it was little things. A missed dinner date, a text left unanswered overnight, plans canceled with vague excuses about being tired, being busy, being whatever. And every time I told myself it was nothing. We were just busy, stressed. Life was happening, that's all. I clung to that belief like a lifeboat, even as the waves rose higher around me. One evening, we were supposed to meet at our diner, the one with the terrible coffee and the jukebox that always seemed to know just the right song. I got there early, as usual, ordered 2 coffees, Saturday by the window, tapping my fingers against the chipped tabletop. I waited and waited. The coffee went cold. The neon outside started buzzing and flickering like a dying firefly. The jukebox played our song, once, twice, and then moved on to something else. Still, she didn't come. I must have looked ridiculous, sitting there alone, smiling sadly at the door every time it opened. But I stayed. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You stay, even when it hurts. When she finally showed up an hour and a half later, she looked different. Not bad, not sad, just distant. Like her body was there, but her mind was somewhere I couldn't reach. She slid into the booth across from me, offered a tired smile, and said, "Sorry, got caught up." No explanation. No apology that reached her eyes. And I, fool that I was, just nodded and said it was okay, because I was too afraid to push. Too afraid that if I pulled at that loose thread, everything would come undone. Have you ever done that, my friend? Held your breath and pretended not to notice the walls crumbling around you? It's exhausting, isn't it? Like trying to hold back the tide with your bare hands. That night, we barely talked. The words between us felt forced, brittle. Like we were actors reading lines from a script we no longer believed in. I tried to joke. She forced a laugh. We both pretended it was fine. And the worst part? The jukebox didn't play our song that night. Not once. Almost like it knew. Weeks turned into months, and things didn't get better. We grew careful with each other, like strangers trying not to offend. There were no more spontaneous dances in grocery store aisles, no more whispered promises on fire escapes, just routine, polite smiles, safe topics. I missed her, even when she was sitting right beside me. Missed her laugh, her warmth, the way she used to look at me like I was some kind of miracle. Now, Her eyes skimmed over me like I was just another part of the scenery. Background noise. White static. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie awake and wonder what went wrong. Was it me? Did I love her too much? Not enough? Did I squeeze too tightly? Or not hold on hard enough? These questions spun around in my head like a broken record, round and round and round. One night, after another lukewarm dinner date, I found myself wandering alone through the city streets. It was chilly, that brittle kind of cold that sneaks into your bones, and as I passed by a bar, I heard it, our song, playing faintly through the open door. I stopped in my tracks, heart lurching in my chest. For a moment, I thought about going inside, about standing there in the doorway and letting the music wrap around me like it used to. But then I realized she wasn't there, and no amount of music could bring her back to me. I turned away, shoved my hands into my pockets, and kept walking, head down, heart heavy. Our song kept playing behind me, growing softer and softer until it finally disappeared into the night. And for the first time, I wondered if promises could really keep a love alive, or if sometimes a song just stops playing, no matter how much you wish it would go on forever. Dear friend, have you ever noticed how silence can be louder than any song? It's strange, isn't it? You expect heartbreak to come crashing in like a thunderstorm, but often it creeps in so softly you almost miss it. Almost. After that night, something inside me shifted. I still showed up, still sent the good morning texts, still laughed at her tired jokes. But it was different. It wasn't hope that fueled me anymore. It was habit. We became two people living parallel lives, sharing space, sharing meals, but not much else. It's funny how you can be lonely even when you're not alone, isn't it? Have you ever felt that, my friend? That hollow kind of loneliness that no amount of company can fix. I remember one Sunday afternoon, gray skies, a drizzle tapping gently against the windows. We were curled up on the couch, a movie playing we'd both seen a dozen times, and for the first time I realized I didn't know what she was thinking anymore. Not really. Her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. Her laughter was just a little too sharp at the edges. I wanted to ask, God, I wanted to ask, where are you, really? Where did you go? But the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat, heavy and unmoving. So instead, I reached for her hand, and she let me. But her fingers didn't curl into mine the way they used to. They just rested there, cold, detached. There's a kind of grief that comes before the end. It's the grief of realizing you've already lost something, even if you're still holding it in your hands. I lived in that grief for a long time. Every day, a small goodbye. Every moment, a reminder that we were slipping further and further apart. We stopped visiting the diner, stopped playing the jukebox, stopped dancing in the kitchen, stopped planning trips, stopped dreaming, stopped trying. I guess when you stop singing the song, eventually you forget the words. One evening, I tried to revive it. I brought home a small speaker, queued up our song, and hit play. The opening notes drifted through the living room like a ghost. I watched her face closely, searching for some flicker of recognition, some spark. But she barely looked up from her book, just mumbled, "Turn it down a little, would you?" And just like that, our song became background noise. Like everything else, like me, I turned it off without saying a word. And that silence, it was deafening. Dear one, sometimes it's not the arguments that end things, not the betrayal, not even the heartbreak. Sometimes it's the quiet, the empty spaces where love used to live, the slow forgetting, the growing distance. We started sleeping further apart. She started working later. I started finding excuses to stay out longer. Neither of us said it, but we both knew. We were building our own exits, brick by brick. And still, part of me clung to the memory of who we used to be. The laughter, the passion, the promises, the song that once filled every crack between us with light. I clung so tightly, my fingers bled from the effort. But memories aren't strong enough to hold up a crumbling house, are they? No matter how tightly you hold on. One night, I found myself sitting alone on the porch, a beer sweating in my hand, staring out into the nothingness. The speaker sat beside me, and, without thinking, I pressed play again. The first chords of our song trickled out, tentative and sweet, a ghost of better days. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. Do you ever chase a feeling, my friend, even when you know it's gone? Even when you know it's going to hurt? That night, I chased it. I let the music dig into the empty spaces inside me. I let it hurt, because sometimes pain is the only thing that reminds you you're still alive. When I opened my eyes, she was standing in the doorway, watching me. Her face was unreadable. For a moment, I thought maybe she remembered too. Maybe she felt it too. Maybe we could find our way back. But then she shook her head, so slightly I almost missed it. And she turned away, went back inside, closed the door softly behind her, softly, like an apology. The song kept playing. I stayed there until it ended, and when the last note faded into the night, I knew. I knew it was over. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. Dear soul, have you ever been so heartbroken that even breathing feels like an effort? I sat on that porch long after the music ended, long after the stars blinked awake in the sky, long after the air turned sharp and cold. I didn't want to go back inside. I didn't want to face the growing emptiness between those walls. Funny, right? How a place once so full of life can become just another house. When I finally dragged myself up, I found her already asleep, or at least pretending to be. Her back was turned, her breathing slow and steady. I stood there for a moment, watching her silhouette in the dim light. I wondered if she was dreaming, and if she was I even in those dreams anymore? Probably not. Probably hadn't been for a long time. I climbed into bed, careful not to disturb her, careful not to cross invisible lines we no longer dared to speak of. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the fan whirring above. My mind drifted back to the days when we couldn't get enough of each other, when even silence between us was golden. Now, silence was a canyon I didn't know how to cross. Have you felt that too, my friend? That terrible, aching silence? Weeks passed in a haze. We went through the motions, made coffee, went to work, ate dinner, watched television, slept side by side, miles apart. We didn't fight. We didn't cry. We didn't even talk much. It was as if we were trying to make the ending painless by pretending it wasn't happening. But endings have a way of bleeding through no matter how tightly you try to patch them up. One evening, she sat me down at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them on the surface. The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second hammering the moment deeper into my bones. "I think," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "I think it's time." Time. Such a simple word. Such a brutal thing. Time to end what we had. Time to let go of the life we built. Time to admit that sometimes love isn't enough. I nodded because there was nothing left to say. We had already said our goodbyes in 1,000 silent ways. Dear one, I wish I could tell you it was dramatic, that there were tears and shouting and grand declarations. But the truth is, real heartbreak is much quieter. It's the steady collapse of something you thought was unbreakable. It's packing boxes with trembling hands. It's dividing records and books and pieces of your life without meeting each other's eyes. It's realizing you don't even know when you stopped being us. We agreed to give each other space. She would stay with her sister for a while. I would stay in the house, the hollow shell of it. As she packed a bag, I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. She moved around quietly, almost apologetically, like she was afraid to wake the memories sleeping in every corner. Before she left, she paused at the door. Her hand hovered over the knob, uncertain. I wondered if she would turn around, say something, anything. But instead, she just whispered, "Take care of yourself." And then she was gone. Just like that. The final note of our song, slipping into silence. The door clicked shut behind her, and I sat there in the empty living room, feeling like a ghost in my own life. It was a strange relief, honestly. The waiting was over. The bleeding had a name now, and yet the ache didn't lessen. It grew, stretching out into every shadow, every sigh, every heartbeat. I wandered around the house like a man lost at sea, touching things we once shared. The chipped mug she loved. The throw blanket we fought over on cold nights. The framed photo of us at the beach, grinning into the sun. Everything was saturated with her, and yet she was gone. Do you know that feeling, my friend? When the absence is so loud it drowns out the whole world? I finally made it to our bedroom. Her scent still lingered in the sheets. It broke me. I crumpled onto the bed, clutching her pillow, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I cried. Messy, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs. The kind that leave you hollow afterward. The kind that scrape your soul raw. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let yourself feel it. The pain, the loss, the death of a dream. I lay there for hours, letting it wash over me, letting it carve new spaces inside me where hope might someday grow again. By dawn, I was empty, a shell, but oddly enough, there was a strange kind of peace in that emptiness, a beginning hidden in the ending. I knew the road ahead would be lonely. I knew there would be nights I'd still reach out for her in my sleep. Songs that would gut me unexpectedly. Memories that would ambush me when I least expected. But I also knew I would survive. Somehow, some way. Dear friend, have you ever heard the sound of your own footsteps in an empty house? It's a strange thing. Every creak of the floorboards, every hollow thud against the walls. It's like the house itself is grieving with you. After she left, I couldn't bear to sit still, so I wandered from room to room, pretending I was just checking things. Windows, locks, lights, but really, I was just searching for pieces of her I might have missed. A forgotten sweater, a hair tie, a handwritten grocery list. Anything at all. The kitchen felt the loneliest. She used to hum while she cooked. Nothing fancy, just little tunes that made the air feel warmer. Now, it was just the mechanical click of the fridge, the drip of a leaky faucet, the echo of a life we once shared. I tried making myself a sandwich, but the bread felt stale. The lettuce wilted. The mayo smelled wrong. So I gave up halfway through and poured myself a whiskey instead. Not my best coping strategy, I'll admit. But that night, it was all I could manage. Tell me, dear soul, have you ever tried to fill a broken heart with something that only left you emptier? I took the drink out to the back porch. Saturday, on that same old swing where we used to laugh and dream and make impossible plans. The wood groaned under my weight. The wind carried a chill that went straight to my bones. And for a while, I just swung there back and forth, like some sad pendulum ticking away the seconds of my loneliness. The neighbors' houses twinkled with life. TVs flashing behind curtains. Laughter drifting across fences. Cars pulling into driveways. It felt like the whole world was still moving, stubbornly alive, while I was stuck in some slow-motion grief loop. Funny, isn't it? How life just keeps going, whether you're ready or not. Eventually, the whiskey kicked in, softening the sharper edges of the night. I closed my eyes and let the darkness wrap around me. It wasn't the same as peace, but it was something close. Something numb and heavy and just bearable enough. When I stumbled back inside, I noticed it. A little post-it note stuck to the fridge. I must have missed it earlier. It was her handwriting. Simple, almost shy. It said, "Don't forget to water the plants. Love you always." My breath caught. For a second, I forgot how to move, forgot how to think. I pressed my forehead against the cold metal of the fridge, clinging to that stupid little note like it was a lifeline. Love you always. Not goodbye. Not I'm sorry. Just always. Can you imagine that, dear listener? How a scrap of paper can shatter you more completely than 1,000 shouted words. I ripped the note off the fridge and tucked it into my pocket. A talisman against the loneliness. A reminder that even endings could be lined with tenderness. It didn't fix anything. Didn't change the fact that she was gone. But it softened the blow. Just a little. Enough to breathe. Enough to survive the night. The plant sat in the windowsill, drooping and thirsty. I filled a watering can and carefully, gently, gave them what they needed. As if, by tending to them, I was tending to the remnants of our love. The leaves shivered under the water, almost grateful, and I realized maybe grief isn't just about endings. Maybe it's also about caretaking, about honoring what was beautiful, even when it hurts. The night stretched long and restless. I wandered back to the living room, turned on the radio. Soft, crackling old songs floated into the space. Not our song. Never our song. I wasn't ready to hear it yet. Maybe never would be. But these other songs, they filled the silence just enough to keep me company. Have you ever found yourself clinging to music, my friend? Like a raft in a storm? I curled up on the couch, an old blanket pulled over my legs, staring at nothing, listening to the quiet murmur of forgotten voices through the speakers. The stars winked down through the windows, silent witnesses to my unraveling. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it 1,000 memories, some too heavy to hold, some too precious to forget. And somewhere, in that half-dreaming, half-aching space between awake and asleep, I thought I heard her laugh, light, carefree, the way she used to laugh when I said something foolish. I smiled through the tears that pricked my eyes. Maybe it was just the whiskey. Or maybe love doesn't just leave. Maybe it lingers. In echoes. In shadows. In dreams. I drifted off eventually. Not peacefully. Not cleanly. But sleep found me, like a tired old friend. And for a few blessed hours, the ache dulled. The house breathed around me. The plants leaned toward the moonlight. The post-it note warmed in my pocket. And somewhere in the distance, life, stubborn and tender, waited for me to catch up. Dear one, have you ever written a letter you knew you'd never send? Something about putting it all down, just for yourself, like opening a window in a room that's been locked too long. That's what I did, on a rainy Wednesday, with nothing but the sound of water tapping the window and my own breath to fill the space. I sat down with a cup of tea that went cold before the ink had dried, and I wrote her a letter. It started simply, just, "Hey, you." That's how we always began. No need for formalities when two people have known every inch of each other's hearts. And then I kept going, pouring myself into the page, as if somehow she could hear me across the silence. I told her things I hadn't even told myself. Like how I still waited for her text when something funny happened. How I sometimes reached across the bed before remembering no one was there. And how her toothbrush was still in the cup beside mine. Even now, even after all this time. Do you get that, my friend? How some things just stay. Not because we forget, but because we can't forget. The letter wasn't just sad. There was joy, too. Little memories I didn't want to lose to time. Like the time she danced in the kitchen in mismatched socks. Or how she'd hum when she didn't know the words to a song. Or the way she'd look at me like I was the most precious thing in the world, even on the days I didn't deserve it. I wrote about the fights too, the ones that left silence thicker than walls between us, but also the way we always found our way back, like two magnets pulled by something bigger than ourselves, until we didn't. You ever wonder, dear soul, if we're all just one wrong decision away from losing everything? Like love is this fragile thing, beautiful, sure, but hanging by threads we can't always see. That's what I felt when I wrote that letter, that everything precious is so easy to break. I told her I forgave her, even if I didn't fully know what for. Maybe for leaving. Maybe for staying as long as she did when she already felt far away. Maybe for being human and needing more than I could give. And I asked for her forgiveness too, because I know I made her feel alone even when we were side by side. That kind of loneliness cuts deeper than most. You've felt it before, haven't you? By the end, my hand ached. The words had poured out so fast I could barely keep up. I signed it with love, not goodbye, because some part of me still wasn't ready to let go. Even now, even in silence, even when the ink dried on words she would never read. I folded the letter gently, like something sacred, slipped it into an old envelope, and placed it in the drawer where we kept old receipts and spare keys. It's still there, waiting, not to be sent, just to be like a quiet witness to a love that once lived and still lingers in corners I don't always look. That night, sleep came easier, not soft, but easier, like I'd carved out a little room in my chest for grief to sit and stop pacing. And when I dreamed of her smile, not the real one, not exactly, but the way I remember it, warm, forgiving, whole. Maybe that's all healing really is. Not fixing, not forgetting, but remembering differently, softer, kinder. And when I woke, the world hadn't changed. But I had just enough, just barely, to make it through another day. Dear heart, if you ever write a letter like that, know this, you don't need to send it. Sometimes, speaking the truth, even to paper, is enough. More than enough. Hey friend, have you ever gone back to a place that once meant everything to you, only to find it both exactly the same and completely different? That's what happened to me one slow Sunday, when the loneliness got too heavy to carry alone. I found myself driving, without really thinking, down roads we used to know, like the back of our hands. past the old diner where we had our first real date, where she laughed so hard at her own joke that she snorted soda through her nose, past the little bookstore where we'd spent whole afternoons pretending we were looking for gifts, but really just hunting for corners to sit and talk in whispers. Funny how memory can make places glow, right? Like the sun hits them differently when you're looking through the lens of a heart that's still cracked open. I drove by the river, the one we swore we'd swim across someday, even though we never did. Life got busy. Dreams got postponed. You know how that happens. One day turns into 1,000, and the wild promises of youth get tucked away like postcards you mean to send but never do. I parked near the old pier. It was weathered, worn down by years of storms and sunshine. Just like me, I guess. Just like us. I sat there a long while, listening to the creak of wood and the soft lap of water against stone. It was quiet, not the heavy, suffocating quiet of our last days together. This was different. This was the kind of silence that felt clean, like something being slowly washed away, wave after gentle wave. Dear one, have you ever felt the weight of a memory ease? Just a little? Just enough for you to breathe again? I thought about how we used to come here at sunset, sit side by side without talking, our hands tangled together, watching the sky melt into shades of fire and gold. Back then, it felt like we were infinite, untouchable. But nothing stays untouched forever, does it? Life has a way of carving itself into you, soft at first, then deeper, until you realize you're carrying entire landscapes inside your chest. I wandered into town, past the bakery that still smelled like cinnamon and hope, past the church whose bells still rang at noon sharp, past houses with porches we once dreamed of owning, when the future still felt like a wide open hand stretched out to us. Now it felt smaller, not closed exactly, but no longer endless, measured, tender, worn soft by reality. Maybe that's not a bad thing, dear heart. Maybe it's just growing up. There's a little antique shop tucked behind the main street. You wouldn't even notice it if you weren't looking. We found it once by accident, chasing each other in the rain. She bought a music box there, a tiny, battered thing that played a song neither of us recognized, but somehow it felt like ours. I stepped inside, half hoping it was still there, half hoping it wasn't. The bell over the door chimed, and there it was. Not the same music box, but 100 others, each with their own secret songs. I didn't buy one. I just listened for a while, let the delicate notes weave around me until they almost filled the empty spaces. Almost, but not quite. Some absences are too vast for even the sweetest music to fill. When I left, the sun was starting to set, the sky burning the edges of the day into something soft and beautiful, and just a little bit sad. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching the world turn gold. And I thought, maybe some places aren't meant to be reclaimed. Maybe they're meant to be remembered, honored, like a scar you trace with your fingers, not because it hurts, but because it was real, because it mattered. As I drove home, the radio played a song we used to love. Not our song, not the one that never played again, but one close enough to make my chest ache. I didn't change the station. I let it play. I let it hurt. And somewhere in that bittersweet melody, I felt a tiny piece of peace. Not the kind that makes everything okay, but the kind that says, you survived. You're still here. You loved once, deeply enough that it echoes even now. And that's something, isn't it, my friend? That's something worth holding on to. Hey, my dear friend, have you ever caught yourself having conversations with someone who's no longer there? Whispering the things you should have said, the apologies, the thank yous, the desperate, clumsy I miss yous, but only in the empty rooms of your mind? I do that sometimes, especially late at night, when the world softens, and the only thing louder than the ticking clock is the quiet hum of your own heart. It's in those in-between hours that I find myself talking to her, saying all the things I swallowed back when I had the chance. I never told her how much I loved the way she curled up to read, tucking her feet under her, the concentration wrinkling her forehead just a little, or how watching her dance around the kitchen, barefoot and wild, felt like witnessing something sacred, or how her laugh could light up a room better than any lamp or sunshine. I never said how scared I was every single day of losing her. How sometimes I loved her so much it hurt, like trying to hold on to smoke with bare hands. Dear one, have you ever been that afraid to lose something that you end up pushing it away first, just to brace for the inevitable pain? I did that. I didn't mean to, but fear makes you do foolish things, even when you swear you're being careful. I think part of me thought, if I pull away just a little, it won't hurt as much when it ends. Spoiler alert, my sweet friend, it still hurt. Maybe even more. There were so many moments when I could have turned back, could have said, I'm scared, I need you, but pride's a heavy armor, and once you put it on, it's hard to take off again. Harder still to admit you're wearing it to hide the softest, most breakable parts of yourself. If I could go back, I wouldn't try to be so strong. I wouldn't pretend indifference. I'd look her right in those storm-colored eyes and say, you terrify me, because you matter more than anything. And I don't ever want to imagine a world where you're not standing next to me. But I didn't. And now those words live in the spaces between dreams and regrets. One night, not long before the end, we sat in the car outside her apartment, neither of us wanting to say goodbye, but neither knowing how to stay either. The radio was off. The windows fogged slightly from our breath, and in that thick, aching silence, I almost said it all. Almost. But instead, I stared straight ahead, hands clenched too tightly around the steering wheel, and she looked at me for a long moment, like she was searching for something. A sign. A crack in the walls I'd built too high and too fast. She must have realized it wasn't going to come, because after a while, she opened the door, stepped out into the cold, and didn't look back. Dear one, sometimes the loudest words are the ones left unspoken. They echo in the hollow spaces of memory, louder and longer than any shouted goodbye. If I could tell you anything tonight, if you're still awake, listening to my half-drunken ramblings, it's this: don't leave things unsaid. Don't assume people know. Tell them, even if your voice shakes, especially if your voice shakes. Because one day, you might find yourself alone in a quiet room, talking to the shadows of what could have been. And let me tell you, my sweet friend, ghosts make terrible company. I learned that lesson too late for her, but maybe, just maybe, not too late for me. Maybe not too late for you either. What do you think, dear heart? Is there someone you should call tomorrow? Someone who needs to hear what you've tucked away behind fear and pride. Think about it. And when you do, maybe send that message. Make that call. Even if it's just to say, "Hey, I thought of you today, and it made me smile." Sometimes that's enough to keep a heart from breaking quietly in the dark. There's this coffee shop, tucked away on 3rd and Rosewood. You probably wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking for it. It doesn't try to be Trendino exposed brick or avocado toast. Just old wood floors that creak when you walk in. A counter where the barista still remembers your name, and chairs that wobble just enough to remind you they've been there longer than some marriages. That's where I saw her again, after everything, after the silence, the not calls, the what could have beens. She walked in like she always had, like time hadn't dared to touch her. Same coat, same way she tucked her hair behind her ear. And when she looked around that room, her eyes landed on me. Of course they did. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. Isn't it funny, dear one, how we think we're past something until we see it again, in the flesh, breathing, wearing a scarf we once bought together? That moment hit like a wave you didn't see coming, and I wasn't ready to drown. She smiled, just a little, enough to break me open in places I thought were sealed tight. And then she walked over. Of course she did, because she was always the brave one. I stood up, knocked my knee into the table, spilled a bit of my coffee, and fumbled out a hey that sounded like it had been buried for years. We sat. We talked. Not about us at first. About work. About how the city had changed. About how the winters felt colder. And how the coffee shop still made the world's worst croissants. I laughed. She laughed. And for a moment, it felt like we were pretending to be people who hadn't shattered each other. But silence crept in like it always does when truth waits its turn. She looked at me, her fingers tracing circles on the rim of her cup, and then she said, "I heard our song the other day." Just like that. No build-up, no warning. Just a sentence that cracked open 100 memories in my head. I nodded, my mouth suddenly too dry to answer. Of course, she'd heard it. It was our song, the one that used to play on Sunday mornings, when the world was soft, and we were softer. The one we danced to in the kitchen, her feet on mine, giggling like we were the only people left alive. "Yeah, that song." She said it caught her off guard, that she had to pull over because her hands were shaking, that she hadn't thought it would still make her feel anything. And then, almost like she regretted saying it, she looked down at her hands and said, "It doesn't hit the same anymore." I didn't know what to say. Was that closure? A goodbye wrapped in melody and minor chords. I wanted to tell her that I still hear it. In supermarkets, in movies, in my own damn head, that sometimes when the apartment is too quiet, I play it on purpose, not to cry, just to feel, because numbness is worse than sadness, my friend, way worse. She looked up at me then, eyes searching, not angry, not hurt, just tired. And I realized in that moment, we weren't who we used to be, and maybe we never would be again. But for a brief second, in that tiny coffee shop with bad croissants, we were two people who once loved each other enough to remember. I asked if she wanted to walk. She said she couldn't, had somewhere to be, but she squeezed my hand before she left, a quiet gesture, soft as a whisper, and when the door shut behind her, the bell above it jingled like it always had. But this time it sounded like a song that knew too much. I sat there for a while, watching the coffee in my cup grow cold, thinking about how some love stories don't end, they just fade, like background music in a place that used to mean something. You still hum along, but the words don't taste the same. You know what I mean, don't you? It's strange, the way life brings people back. Not to stay, but just to remind you of who you were, who you still might be underneath all the dust and time. And maybe that's enough. Maybe seeing her smile again, in that one sacred little corner of the city, was all the closure I ever needed, even if it didn't feel like closure at all. You ever look at a chair and remember an argument? Not because it was dramatic, but because that's where she sat. Arms crossed, eyebrows lifted, like she was waiting for me to say something that would fix everything. That was the thing about our place. It wasn't just a home. It was a breathing museum of our best and worst. Every creaky floorboard had heard us whisper, "I love you," and then later, "I'm sorry." That couch, it still leans slightly to the left, where we used to curl up, watch old movies, her head on my chest, sighing content like she belonged there. And she did. Even the chipped coffee table, you know the one, dear listener, the kind you tell yourself you'll replace but never do, held echoes of spilled wine, laughter, and late-night Chinese takeout containers. It was all still there, even after she wasn't. The night she left, she didn't slam doors. She didn't throw anything. Number. She packed quietly. A jacket here, a book there, and when she passed by that crooked photo frame by the hallway, she straightened it. That simple, that gentle, and it broke me more than shouting ever could. I didn't change the apartment after she left. Couldn't. Because in a strange way, I felt like moving anything would mean admitting she was gone. Like maybe, if I just left it all untouched, She'd walk in again one day and sit on that same side of the bed, ask what we're ordering for dinner, and kiss me with the tired lips of someone who still chose me. But she didn't. Of course not. Time passed. Seasons did what they do. They came and went without asking permission. And little by little, the apartment started to feel less like ours, and more like mine. But every now and then, I'd catch myself reaching for 2 mugs instead of 1, or looking up from a movie to make a comment, only to realize I was alone. It's those quiet betrayals of habit that sting the most. One day, I finally took down the wind chime she hung by the window. It hadn't chimed in months. The wind never blew right through that part of the building. But I swear, the moment I touched it, I heard it sing. Just once. Soft and high, like a sigh caught between worlds. You ever have a moment like that? Where something you thought was just an object suddenly feels sacred? I kept her books on the shelf. All of them. Even the ones I hated. Even the one with all the sticky notes where she argued with the author in tiny pink pen. She used to say, "Books remember how you feel when you read them." So maybe, just maybe, if I opened one, I'd feel her again. Not the leaving version. The one who danced barefoot on Sunday mornings. Sometimes, my friend, I wonder if I held on too tightly. To things, to rooms, to shadows of conversations long done. But grief, you see, isn't just sadness. It's devotion. It's love that has nowhere to go. So we build altars out of the ordinary, a spoon, a song, a scarf in the back of a drawer, and we worship quietly. You're probably thinking I should have moved on by now, and I did, in ways. I dated. I smiled at strangers again. I even learned to cook something other than pasta. But you don't forget the way a home feels when it's filled with someone's laugh. That kind of sound gets into the walls, into your ribs, into the silence that comes after. One night, I sat on the edge of the bed, the same side she used to sleep on, and I realized the sheets still smelled like her. Not the perfume, not the shampoo, but something deeper, memory. And for the first time in months, I cried without holding back, not because I missed her, but because I knew she wasn't coming back. Funny how grief waits for you to be still. It doesn't rush. It lurks in untouched teacups and half-written letters. And then one day, when you least expect it, you pick up a book she loved, turn to a page she marked, and there she is. Not haunting you, just sitting beside you, peaceful, like she never left. So I started talking to her again. Not out loud, but in those half-thoughts we all have. You do it too, don't you? Tell me I'm not the only one who still asks a memory what they would have done. It helps. Not to bring them back, but to remind you that once you were loved that deeply. Now, every few weeks I move something in the apartment, not out of guilt, but as a way of letting go. A chair, a curtain, a crooked photo. I straighten it. Not because she would have, but because I want it to feel like mine now. Like I've finally made peace with the echoes. And you know what? They're quieter now. still there, but softer. Dear friend, if you've lost someone, don't be ashamed of how long it takes to let go. Time isn't linear. It's messy. It loops and doubles back and leaves you breathless on a Tuesday afternoon because a smell or a song or a street name punches you in the heart. And that's okay. That's love too. Just a different shape of it. You ever sit in your car long after the engine's off, just waiting for the radio to play something that feels like you again? Not just background noise, but a song that knows you? It used to be our thing, driving aimlessly, windows down, her hand resting on mine over the gear shift. The breeze would carry her laugh, and the music. Oh, the music. She had this uncanny talent for picking the right song. You know, the one that perfectly fit the shape of the sky. One evening, maybe a month after she left, I was driving home from work. Long day. One of those days where even coffee doesn't touch the exhaustion, and the song came on. Yeah, that one. You know what I mean, don't you? That one track that only ever plays when your heart isn't ready for it. I nearly pulled over, not because I was crying, but because I wasn't. I was still, like the air around me had thickened, and even blinking felt like disturbing a memory. It was as if the universe whispered, "Hey, remember her?" And, oh, I did. Every note, every breath between verses. She loved that song because it never rushed. It took its time, like she did when telling a story. Always starting somewhere in the middle. "Okay, so imagine this," she'd say. Then spend 5 minutes describing the color of a stranger's shoes before getting to the actual point. I miss that. That unhurried chaos. That charm. That warmth. The silence that came after the song ended, brutal. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow. A void. As if even the universe didn't know what to play next. And in that nothingness, I heard her voice. Not literally, but the echo of her laughter. The way she'd hum along out of tune, it haunted that silence. Funny thing about grief, it's in the pauses, not the pain. It's in those little gaps between moments. The breath before a memory hits. The space where someone used to be. And once you learn to listen there, you'll hear them. Not always loud, not always kind, but true. Always true. I parked outside our old place once. Didn't go in. Didn't even text the new tenant. Just sat there, letting the headlights wash over the familiar cracks in the driveway. Remembering the time she slipped on that stupid icy patch and laughed so hard she cried, then cried for real because she realized she was falling in more ways than one. With me, for me, and I caught her then. At least, I like to think I did. Have you ever gone back to a place where love once lived, just to see if anything remembered you? A mailbox, a railing, the way light falls across a certain porch step. Sometimes it feels like time folds inward, and you can almost touch the moment again. Almost, but not quite. She once told me, Don't let our song get dusty. And for a while, I didn't understand, but I do now. She wasn't talking about Spotify playlists. She meant the memory, the feeling, the slow dance in the kitchen when dinner was burning, the wordless understanding in a shared look, the way hearts sync without trying. I stopped playing that song for a while, because it hurt too much, and because it made her too real, to hear. But eventually, I played it again, and again, not to bring her back, but to honor her, to say, this mattered. You know what I mean, don't you, my friend? Some songs aren't just song, they're proof. And then one day, it stopped playing. Not just on the radio, everywhere. It vanished. Like the universe finally decided to let me go. Or maybe, let her go. I don't know, but it scared me. Because what if forgetting the song meant forgetting us? So I sang it to myself, in the shower, in traffic, soft, broken, and imperfect, but mine, ours. I didn't care if the notes were wrong. I just needed to hear it, even if I was the only one who could. Because love, dear listener, doesn't disappear. It just changes its station. And I started writing again. Not poems or songs, just little notes. To her, to myself, to the universe. I'd scribble them on receipts, napkins, my wrist, just enough to catch the emotion before it faded. You ever do that? Hold a feeling in ink, like pressing a flower in a book? It helps. It really does. The silence between two songs can be the loudest part of a playlist. That space where everything echoes, where your heart waits, hoping for the next melody to save it. But sometimes, the silence is the song. A requiem, a prayer, a whispered thank you. I still wait for it sometimes. The melody, the voice, her voice. But more often than not, I realize I've become the one who sings now, the one who remembers, the one who carries the tune forward. And maybe that's how we live on. Not in playlists or photo albums, but in someone's hum, soft and uncertain, but full of love. You know, there's a strange kind of loyalty we keep to people who leave us. Not because they asked us to wait, but because we never knew how to stop. It's like the heart plants itself somewhere, and even when the person walks away, it just doesn't uproot. That was me, still living in the same city, still walking the same streets, still glancing into the same cafe window, where we used to sit by the corner booth, her always with her oat milk cappuccino, me with whatever was cheapest. Still choosing that exact spot by the window, even when it meant waiting 20 minutes. People think healing means moving on, but sometimes healing is staying long enough to make peace with the ghosts, to tell them, okay, I see you, but I'm gonna sit here anyway. And that's what I did. I stayed in this city and our memories, in the shell of a love I still wasn't ready to stop remembering. Dear friend, have you ever done that? Held on to something not because it was still good, but because it was once the best thing you ever had? like rereading a book with a tragic ending, hoping this time maybe the words might shift. She never came back. Not even a postcard. No text. No accidental double like on an old photo. Just silence. And yet, every season that passed, I found myself tracking her in the colors. Spring reminded me of her laugh. Summer her sundresses and bare feet on dashboard glass. Fall, the sweaters I lent her and never got back. And winter, that's when the silence felt the loudest. Sometimes I think about moving, a fresh start, a city where her name doesn't live in every alleyway, where the smell of cinnamon doesn't punch me in the throat, with memories of her baking disasters. She couldn't cook to save her life, but man, she tried. I swear, the fire alarm knew her by name. But then I remember, this city didn't hurt me. Love didn't hurt me. It just changed. Like everything does. Like we do. So I stayed. Not waiting. Not hoping. Just staying. Because sometimes the place that broke you is the place you rebuild. I started talking to her out loud. Little things. Look at that dog. Or, you would have hated this latte. People must have thought I was nuts. But it helped. It made the empty seat next to me feel a little less vacant. It was like acknowledging the invisible, saying, "Hey, I know you're not here, but you mattered. You still matter." The world moved on. Friends married. Some had kids. Others changed cities, jobs, last names. And I stayed. I watched the world evolve through the same window. And every so often I imagined her on the other side, walking by, catching my eye, and smiling. That fantasy kept me warm some nights. Not because I thought it would happen, but because it felt like a lullaby I could hum when sleep wouldn't come. You know those nights, don't you, where the bed feels too big, and even the sound of your own breath is too loud. Yeah, those nights. Funny thing is, life did start to move again, in small ways. I took up gardening. Nothing major, just a few pots on the balcony. Basil, mint, some wildflowers, things she used to say she'd grow one day. And I'd water them while talking to her, telling her how bad I still was at keeping things alive. Except memories. I was great at that. You ever notice how grief changes shape? At first, it's a wave that knocks you over. But later, it's like background music. Always there, sometimes loud, sometimes barely a hum. But it becomes a part of you, not an enemy, just a companion. Like a shadow at sunset. There were days I almost deleted her number. Almost. But I couldn't. It felt like deleting a door I might still want to knock on someday. Even though I knew no one was home. Still, I left the porch light on in my heart. And that counts for something, doesn't it? People asked why I stayed, why I didn't get back out there. And I'd smile and say, I'm learning how to be alone without being lonely. Because there's a difference. And once you learn it, you start to see beauty in solitude. Not silence, but solitude. A quietness that comforts instead of deafens. I didn't need to forget her to heal. I just needed to learn how to carry her differently. Not like a wound, but like a story. One I could tell without breaking. And eventually, one I could tell with a smile. I think that's when I knew I'd made peace. Not because I moved on, but because I stopped waiting for her shadow to walk beside me. I started walking anyway, and in that quiet rhythm, something gentle bloomed. A new melody, not our song, but still worth listening to. There was this one day, you know those kinds of days. Gray sky, chilly wind, and everything feels just a little too loud. Even the birds sounded like they were complaining. That was the day I almost let go of it all. The memories, the places, the whole idea that she and I had ever really meant anything. I stood on the bridge where we once watched fireworks, and I just stood, still, motionless. Dear friend, have you ever looked at your own reflection in the water and not recognized yourself? That day, I didn't see a man mourning a love story. I saw a stranger still clutching the pages of a book he refused to finish. I remember gripping the railing tight, like the steel could anchor me, and I said out loud, "This isn't working, is it?" To no one, to everyone, to her, maybe, or to the wind. It was quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet where even your own thoughts echo back with judgment. And then a dog barked. Just a short, startled yelp. A fluffy retriever had pulled free from its leash and ran straight toward me, tail wagging like crazy. Its owner, a girl in her 20s, red scarf, freckles. She ran up, laughing and apologizing. "Sorry. He loves strangers," she said. And I laughed too. I hadn't done that in a while. It wasn't some magical moment like in the movies, but it broke something, or maybe it fixed something. It reminded me that I was still part of the world, still touchable, still human, even in my sorrow. The dog licked my hand. It was warm, wet, ridiculously joyful, and I found myself whispering, "Okay, I'll stay a little longer. Not just on that bridge, but in life, in possibility, in maybe healing." I walked home slower that day, not dragging my feet, just taking my time, like each step deserved its own breath. I passed a bakery we used to love. Didn't go in, but I smiled. And that smile, it felt earned. Not forced, not fake, just soft. Like the kind of smile that comes after tears dry. That evening, I finally opened the drawer, the one with her old letters, ticket stubs, Polaroids of road trips and rainy mornings, and I sat with them. Didn't cry, didn't ache, just remembered. Sometimes healing doesn't look like burning the past. Sometimes it looks like dusting it off, folding it gently, and placing it back with care. I didn't throw anything away, but I did something braver. I let them rest, and I let me rest too. That night, I lit a candle, not because I needed light, but because I wanted warmth. I poured a glass of red wine, played an old vinyl record. Not our song, not even close, but it was something soft, and it hummed through the walls like a lullaby I hadn't known I needed. You know what's wild? I looked around my apartment, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine. Not a museum of what we were, not a haunted echo of her voice, just a place I lived in, a place I could maybe, someday, invite someone new into. Not tomorrow, but someday. I think healing is like tuning a radio. There's static, a lot of it, and then, suddenly, you hear a voice, clear, steady, and you realize it's your own, your voice coming back to you. That was the day I almost let go of myself, of everything. But instead, I chose to stay, to keep walking, to keep breathing, to keep telling you this story. Because maybe, just maybe, you needed to hear it too. We don't always get closure. We don't always get second chances. But we do get mornings, and coffee, and dogs who love strangers, and people who smile back when you least expect it. And some days, that's enough. It was for me. It still is. And if you're standing on your own kind of bridge tonight, literally or not, I hope something reaches you. Maybe not a dog, maybe not a stranger, but this voice, right now, mine, telling you, you're not alone, you're not broken, you're just becoming. It had been years, but one night, almost without realizing, I rolled over and started sleeping on the right side of the bed again. And that simple act, it told me more about my healing than any journal entry ever could. You see, after she left, I stayed curled on the left, where she used to lie. I told myself it was habit, muscle memory, but the truth, I didn't want to disturb the emptiness she left behind. It was sacred. It was hers. And maybe it was all I had left. But healing, it's sneaky. It doesn't always announce itself. It just shows up one night, when you're tired enough, lonely enough, at peace enough, and suddenly, you're sprawled across a space you once avoided like a ghost town. I woke up that morning a little disoriented. The sun hit a different part of my face. I reached instinctively for her, but of course, nothing. Just a pillow, a little too warm, a little too human-shaped, but still, it was progress. Dear friend, have you ever noticed how grief rearranges your body? Where you sit, how you breathe, even how you dream. It builds routines out of sadness, and we follow them like rituals. But that morning, I broke the ritual, and nothing bad happened. I made coffee, a little stronger than usual. Saturday by the window, watched a few kids hop puddles in the street below, and for the first time in ages, I didn't imagine her sitting beside me. I just sat, alone, and okay. There's something so gentle about learning how to be with yourself again. It's like reintroducing an old friend. Hey, it's me. I know we've been through some stuff. Let's try again, yeah? I started changing little things after that. New bed sheets, a different brand of tea. I even rearranged the furniture. Moved the couch to where we used to have the bookshelf. I don't know why. Just felt right. Like maybe the room wanted to breathe again. Or maybe I did. The air smelled different too. Lighter. Less heavy with memory. And I know that sounds silly. How can air change? But it does. Or maybe your nose just learns how to stop sniffing out ghosts. I remember I played music that afternoon. Not her playlist. Not ours. Just mine. Some indie folk stuff with lyrics that sounded like soft truths and quiet prayers. And this strange thing, I hummed along. Didn't cry. Didn't ache. Just hummed. Later that week, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. He said, "Hey man, you look different. Lighter. Like you're not carrying the whole damn world anymore." I laughed. Told him it was just the beard I trimmed. But deep down, I knew what he meant. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't slam doors or set off fireworks. It's slow, gentle, like a tide pulling you back to shore, one wave at a time. And that night, when I slid under the sheets again, right side first, I smiled. To myself, to the dark, to her maybe, wherever she was. You know, sometimes people ask me if I miss her, and I say, of course, but not like before. Not with ache, more like a song you once loved deeply, but now only hum in passing. A quiet thank you to a melody that once held your heart. Some loves don't fade. They just change their shape. They become part of your breathing, your walking, your sleeping on the right side. They don't ask to be mourned forever. They just ask to be remembered kindly. And I do. I really do. Every night I lie down now, I don't wonder if I'll dream of her. But if I do, I let the dream play, softly, like background music on a Sunday morning. No need to skip. No need to hold on too tight. Dear listener, maybe tonight you're curled on one side of the bed, still holding space, still waiting, and that's okay. But maybe, just maybe, when you're ready, you'll roll over too, and when you do, I hope you feel what I felt that night. Not grief, not guilt, but freedom, sweet, quiet freedom. It was a quiet Sunday. Clouds drifted like lazy thoughts over the rooftops. I had just returned from the market, carrying a paper bag filled with oranges, mint, and a loaf of bread I didn't really need. It felt like a day that didn't ask for anything, no reflection, no decisions, just breathing. And then it happened. The song. Our song. It played again. Somehow. I was setting the bag on the kitchen counter when the first notes floated out of the old radio I barely used anymore. It must have switched on by mistake. A glitch. Maybe a timer I'd forgotten about. But there it was. That melody. Those lyrics. I froze. The bread slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a soft thud, and my breath Oh, dear friend, it caught somewhere deep, like it didn't know whether to sigh or sob. You know how music does that? It doesn't knock. It just walks right in, pulls a chair up beside you, and reminds you of every version of yourself you've ever been. I wasn't prepared. I don't think you ever really are. It was the song we used to dance to. Slow, offbeat, barefoot in the kitchen. Back when our love felt like a secret language no one else could translate. We made promises in that song. Promises we didn't keep. Or couldn't. But this time, I didn't turn it off. I didn't rush to mute the past. I let it play. And as it played, I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced. Not gracefully, not in the way she and I used to, but slowly, with eyes closed, alone, and yet not. Because in that moment, she was there, not as a ghost, not as a pain, but as a memory, gentle, uninvited, and strangely kind. I swayed, hands to my chest, and imagined her laugh, the way she'd always miss the second chorus, the way she'd hum off-key, how she'd tilt her head like she was listening to something far away, maybe the future, maybe the end. Dear listener, have you ever shared a song with someone you lost? It's not just a tune, it's a time machine, a fingerprint, a photograph wrapped in sound. And when it plays again, you're no longer in the room alone. You're split between then and now, between who you were and who you've become. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. I smiled, because the grief had softened. It no longer screamed. It whispered, and the whisper was this: you survived. You're okay. And she would have wanted you to dance again. So I did, until the final note faded, and the silence returned like a blanket pulled up over my shoulders. But it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt earned, like the quiet after a storm, like peace. I made tea after that. Lemon balm, my favorite. Saturday by the window, watching a couple walking their dog. They were laughing, and for once, it didn't make me ache. It made me glad. Glad that love still exists somewhere, that maybe someone else will hear our song one day and make it their song. Music doesn't belong to us forever. It passes through, lands for a while, teaches us, then moves on, like people, like seasons. Later, I turned the radio off, but not out of pain, just because it had done its job. The song had come back, not to haunt me, but to release me, and I was ready to let it go, to let her go, not out of forgetting, but out of love. Dear friend, if the song ever plays for you again, don't be afraid. Don't run from it. Let it wash over you. Let it break your heart, if it must, because that's how light gets in. That's how you make room for something new. And if you ever dance again, even just a little, know that somewhere, someone who once held you in that song is smiling too, not with longing, but with grace, with peace. The room was quiet now, but there was something different about it. The shadows stretched longer across the walls as evening settled in. I sat by the window, staring out at the dusk, a deep, peaceful sort of calm washing over me. It's strange, how peace comes. Sometimes it's loud, like a crash of waves on the shore. But sometimes, like tonight, it's soft, like the fading hum of a long-forgotten song. I thought about how much time had passed, how far we drifted from one another, yet that song kept following me, always in the background, like a shadow I could never outrun. But I think I understand now. It wasn't a burden. It wasn't a weight. It was simply life. And life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just moves forward, whether you're holding on to it or not. Have you ever wondered if the things we leave behind follow us like invisible threads? Perhaps they do, and maybe they're not as heavy as we think. Maybe they're just there, quiet, waiting for us to remember, and then to let go. I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of the wind outside, feeling the last of the day's warmth on my face. There was something familiar in that silence, something soft and gentle. It didn't feel empty. It felt full. Dear friend, have you ever felt full without needing to reach for anything? It's the oddest feeling, like you've gathered everything you need, without even realizing it. Like all the pieces of your past, the good and the painful, have finally come together to make you who you are. Not perfect, but whole. I didn't expect this kind of peace. It's not what I thought healing looked like. It's not loud, not dramatic. It's just a quiet acceptance of the things that were and the things that are now. A soft letting go. The night deepened and the radio remained silent, but I didn't feel the need to turn it back on. The song had played its final note, and in its place there was something more profound. A quiet gratitude for all that came before, for every love, every moment, every song that passed through. You see, dear listener, life is full of songs. Some stay with us forever. Some fade out just when we think we need them most. But they all leave a trace, and that trace becomes part of who we are. And in the end, maybe that's enough. So, as I sit here, watching the world outside the window, so peaceful, so still, I realize that the song isn't gone. It lives on in the way I remember her, in the quiet moments, in the space between breaths. It will always be there, and in its own way, it will continue to play, just softly, in the background of my life. And perhaps, one day, it will play for you too, when you're ready, when the time is right. But for now, for tonight, I'm content. I've danced my dance, and I'm at peace with the silence.